FNAF 2 made one of the biggest and most interesting changes to the canon of Five Nights at Freddy's ever by introducing us to Michael Afton, who is a separate character than Mike Schmidt. This complicates things. For context, in the games, while both names do appear, FNAF theorists put together that they are the same character. I'm going off of what's commonly accepted, but if you know Five Nights at Freddy's lore, you know how tricky even finding out someone's real name is. Anyways, in the games, they are the same person. So in the first FNAF movie, when Mike Schmidt was introduced, I thought, wow, they just changed him up a bit to not be an Afton. But no. After seeing Michael in the second movie, who is just as murderous as William Afton, I was shocked. Not due to it being a weird change, not due to the lore implications and the story feeling rushed by adding a new character last minute that probably should have been mentioned in the first one. No, I was shocked at how big of a problem this could end up being in the narrative of the story. See, William Afton is going to come back as Springtrap, being the main antagonist of the story. Previously, with him gone from the second movie, that let Michael take over as the antagonist behind the main conflict, freeing the puppet and basically setting things in motion. This is pretty similar to how William Afton, while mostly in the background of the plot for the most part, sets the story in motion not only by offering Mike the job, but also controlling the animatronics. I'm simplifying a lot, but the connection I'm making here is that they're both villains whose actions directly result in starting the main conflict, and come in at the end to finish the job. I'll talk more about his characteristics later in the video and why it matters, but Michael being on the same side as his father does feel a bit redundant if they end up just working together and having the same goals, trying to achieve it in the same way. Which makes me ask, what even is Michael's role in the story moving forward? Why even include him? Not only that, why go out of your way to include him last minute? This is the problem I'm trying to solve. And after taking another look at a lot of the timelines of the games, I have an insane theory. Well, I have two theories, but my crazier one is built on the first one, being that Michael Afton will betray his father. Yes, I think that the two purple guys will end up betraying each other and facing off in the end. Not only that, I think this has been planned for a while. William Afton is the original purple guy, represented by a purple sprite in a lot of the minigames in Five Nights at Freddy's. But what newer fans might not know is that Mike in the games ends up becoming a literal purple guy and walking around as a living corpse. I mention this not only because I think it's a cool parallel, but also because I think they're going to adapt the main event that made Michael Afton into the purple guy we end up seeing. And that event will lead to Michael betraying his father, and more importantly, wanting revenge. In Five Nights at Freddy's sister location, we play as Mike, or Michael Afton, who in the canon ending of the games gets scooped and has the Ennard animatronic stuffed inside of him. This allows Ennard to take over his body, and slowly over time, Michael's body starts decomposing. After a while, Ennard leaves, and Michael, at this point being beyond dead, ends up repossessing his own body, becoming a purplish undead corpse. This is why in Michael's monologue, he says he should be dead.
But something is wrong with me. I should be dead, but I'm not.
And if we keep listening, we hear him swear that he's going to find his father, William.
There is only one thing left for me to do now. I'm going to come find you.
And what's even better is that they did already foreshadow the sister location game in FNAF 2, where they included the Circus Baby animatronic. So, how might it go? Well, in the games, Michael mentions he was sent to the Circus Baby's entertainment and rental by William, unknowingly walking into a trap with killer animatronics. After the trap got sprung, Michael dies, and then goes off to find his father. Circus Baby had a lot to do with tricking Michael, but importantly, it seems like he blames his father. There's kind of a weird problem though, being that Game Michael and Movie Michael are completely different characters depending on your interpretation of the games. But this motivation can transfer over pretty easily. William Afton, now Springtrap, sends Michael somewhere dangerous, maybe even Circus Baby's entertainment and rental, though probably under different circumstances. And there, Michael gets sacrificed in a way, in order to free some animatronics or whatever is part of William's greater plan. Up until this point, Michael would do whatever his father wants, as explained in FNAF 2, as he sees himself as one of his children who has to do whatever William Afton says. But after coming back to life, he would feel angry at being tossed aside or sacrificed. Now, why would William Afton do this? This theory relies on William knowingly sacrificing his son. Maybe. I mean, I guess it could just be an accident, but that's not as interesting to me. No, instead, there's some evidence from the games we can use to speculate that William Afton might actually hate Michael. See, in FNAF 4, Michael is directly responsible for the death of his younger brother, the crying child, by causing the bite of 1983. Sure, it was an accident and the result of bullying going way too far, but this event is used in a lot of theories to contextualize William and Michael's dynamic. Importantly, we don't actually see them interact on screen yet, so we don't really know what their relationship is really like. But based on how Michael acts, it seems a bit one-sided. Anyways, William could resent Michael and blame him for his son's death. Whether they will include the crying child or not in the movies is yet to be seen, but Five Nights at Freddy's has shown they like to add big characters last minute, so I'm not ruling it out. Besides, he's a very important character in the games, being the sole focus in FNAF 4, and while they could just not include him, that'd be a huge missing piece from the original lore. Even if they don't include him, William does show that he doesn't really care about his kids all that much, so Michael could just make a small mistake or something, and William just sends him off so he doesn't get in the way. Or knows that someone needs to be a vessel for the scooper if they choose to use that plot line and offer up Michael. Overall, there are a lot of options here, so I'm not too worried about this part. But why? Why adapt this? Why go through all this trouble to make Michael a villain and then have him betray his own father? Well, this is my crazier theory, and fans of the game will know what I'm referring to. My theory is that Michael Afton will end up being the vengeful spirit, or the one you should not have killed. This is an insane theory, I know. And before we continue, consider subscribing and liking the video. Every single one of your likes matter, and you get to join the most niche community on the internet. Anyways, there are a few theories on what William Afton's fate ends up being at the end of Five Nights at Freddy's. One is that the FNAF game Ultimate Custom Night is from his perspective, being in a sort of hell, tortured by the vengeful spirit. This spirit is referred to by other characters as the one you should not have killed. My theory is that this spirit in the movies will be Michael Afton. In the FNAF games, there's been a few different candidates on who this could be, and the discussion around it can get pretty heated. But it's important to note that in the film's timeline, there really isn't a good option yet. Firstly, all of William's victims we've seen so far shouldn't have been killed, but none of them were murdered in a more violent way compared to the others. For someone to be the vengeful spirit, there's implied to be a special circumstance surrounding their death. Secondly, there isn't a victim that's been particularly vengeful against William Afton. Even the boy who possessed Golden Freddy, who was responsible for keeping him locked away in FNAF 2, ended up passing on with the other children and even warned Mike about it. Keep this detail in mind for later, because I think there's a really good reason for that under this theory. There's just no good option. Even Charlie, who possessed the puppet, was more angry at the adults who ignored her than anyone else, even working alongside Michael. It's important to note that this spirit would have to be so angry at William that they would forfeit their own afterlife in order to torture him. Sure, it might be warranted, but this fate is still tragic, even for the vengeful spirit, so they wouldn't move on like everyone else. In a way, they would also be trapped. There's also the thematic motif of people breaking away from William Afton's control. In the first movie, the animatronics and Vanessa ultimately broke free from him. Sort of. I mean, I guess Vanessa is still kind of traumatized, but at least she isn't trying to get night guards killed anymore. On purpose. William Afton haunts the narrative. Even being absent from the story in the second movie, everything we see on screen is a direct result from his actions. Charlotte's death, Michael's weird idea of what it means to be his son, Vanessa's nightmares, everything comes back to William. And when the animatronics and Vanessa break free and fight back, this ultimately leads to his death. So the next time someone else gets free from his control and chooses to fight back, him dying again would resonate really well. It seems like a common tactic for him is to use people to get what he wants, as opposed to always getting his hands dirty. He likes being the one in control, so it'd be a fitting fate for him not to be. But why Michael? Well, Michael isn't a good person either. We don't know the extent of his involvement, but from what we see in FNAF 2, he's enthusiastic about killing people and has clearly worked for his father before. And this is why he would be a better option than just another victim of William Afton's killings, because he would be in a sort of hell with William too. This would be, in a way, penance for his actions. The children we've seen so far were still suffering after death due to William, possessing the animatronics and forced to live only partly alive. But the children from the missing children's incident at the end of the FNAF 2 movie do move on in the end. Maybe under supernatural circumstances, but they are allowed to let their spirits rest. The boy who possessed Golden Freddy does what he can, but moves on with the others. It wouldn't make thematic sense for one of his victims to still be suffering, even if it is in the role of William Afton's prison guard. That fate is still tragic, and while it can serve as a message on vengeance, it would, in a way, let him win in the end, trapping one more victim alongside him. Michael would also be vindictive enough to fill this role. As mentioned, he isn't a good person. He's violent and vengeful, even against his own sister. Sure, he could be sympathetic and fight Springtrap for good reasons too, but he's also sinister enough to psychologically fill the role of the vengeful spirit. This could also be why Michael and Mike were made into separate characters. For general audiences, it can be tricky to follow along with an immoral protagonist. Not only that, but Mike does serve the purpose of being a hero, and calling Michael one wouldn't feel right, assuming he was an accomplice in the killings. Five Nights at Freddy's has a darker story than you think, but it'd be a hard sell to tell a hugely depressing story. So, splitting the character into two still serves the plot, while keeping a sympathetic character we can root for and empathize with. I mention this because clearly the movies are targeted at a younger audience too, as it has that PG-13 rating. To what extent they would show this ending, I don't know, especially since conceptually it's a lot more abstract. But what's kind of interesting is that they already play with these sort of concepts in the films. Vanessa's nightmares about her father haunt her, and the way it's filmed seems to be a step up from Mike's own dreams, where he interacts with the spirits from the missing children's incident in the first movie. To me, this is one of the coolest scenes in the second movie, and they show how weird they can get with the visuals, especially as it's something that's not actually happening in the real world. And this is how I think that line could come in too. In this scenario, it wouldn't be another character or animatronic telling William Afton he's being tortured. Instead, it would be Michael himself telling him that he is the one you should not have killed. So, will this theory be right? Probably not, but could you imagine the rush of getting something as crazy as this right? This is my equivalent of lowballing on Facebook Marketplace. Look, you gotta subscribe to see more crazy theories, because if we do this enough, one of them will be right, and it's gonna be crazy when that happens. So don't miss out. And if you like hearing about FNAF theories, check out this video where I covered old FNAF theories that were actually right, and ended up aging really well. Thank you so much for watching, have a great rest of your day, and as always, I hope you're a bit less bored.